One. You know what I love about having this as my background image? You don't have it.
Oh my gosh. So this is one of those rare, rare, rare occasions where John shot something I'm just so jealous of. And so on our trip,
Yeah.
everybody flocked in to shoot John's shot, and then they all went home. And then Diane came, and we're
Oh,
there. And
yeah.
I went in there and recreated it on my iPhone.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great,
And you sent it to me and said yours is still better.
yeah, that's a great shot. Um,
That was a fun one.
So I think we teased in our last episode that I was going to give a small presentation on Simplify because
Excellent.
I really do love simple images. So let's just, without further
All right.
ado, share my screen. And so simple.
Yeah, good to go. I see you're just fine.
I love simple images. Boy, the simpler, the better. But that wasn't always the case. In my past, my images tended to be, I don't know the right word, but I would just call they were cluttered images. Not to say they weren't good, but they had a lot of detail. And I don't know. I started finding myself slowly gravitating towards a simpler image. And that just process continued for about the last 10 years. And so my goal generally is
Huh.
to two elements in my image: the subject and then a subdued background that doesn't compete with the subject. And so everything I do now is focused on that: a simple subject with a subdued background. And I'm generally using 5 techniques to simplify my images. The first is the composition, and that's, of course, the best place to start. It's hard to fix an image that doesn't start right. So this is one we just did. This was our talking about the weather in the Faroes. We were on top of the Sarnfelli radar station, an old World War II radar station, a high overlook that is almost always socked in, and the fog just parted for a couple of minutes. So I created that for an addition to my road to nowhere. I just try to eliminate anything that isn't important to the image. And that, of course, begins when you're taking the shot. And the simpler, the better. And then the next thing that I do is I use the long exposure, and I use it a lot. This is a plume coming off of a coal-fired power plant, and it would have a lot of detail, but this is a 30-second exposure, and it just does something. It simplifies the image. An 8-minute exposure of the water up in New Brunswick. I'll use it with the sky. Love what it did with the clouds here. They would have been just a distraction to this rock, but with a long exposure, they just became something beautiful. And of course, from the Faroe Islands. I also use long exposures with people. I found a lot of uses of long exposure beyond the obvious waterfall shot. And sometimes I'll do a split technique. Our friend Roger recently talked about this. I'll use the long exposure in the lower half because I wanted the smooth water. I didn't want all those ripples to be competing with the top half. And so that top half is a still, and I just combined the two. Next, I used underexposing and overexposing. I use underexposing to remove detail. And it's ironic that so many times throughout my life, people have criticized my dark images. You need to bring more detail in, but I'm doing it for a good reason,
Yeah.
to dull that background so that the subject really stands out. And I don't always use the dark image, though. To use the same technique, I'll often overexpose to again remove some detail to bring the focus to the subject. The next thing I do is dodging and burning. They kind of work hand in hand with over and underexposing. What I can't completely do through underexposing or overexposing, I'll do in Photoshop using dodging and burning with my pen and tablet. Here there's really no detail anywhere.
Yeah.
And here again, reducing the detail to make the subject the focus of the eye. Now, this is one of my favorite power line images, and I wanted to show the before and after just so you could see how distracting that image would have been if I would have left any detail in. So I burned that down as just almost to nothing but the telephone lines. The next one is contrast. I use contrast to focus the eye. That combined with the dark image is something that I love. And of course, contrast can be easily manipulated after the fact. And then, oh, this is one that I didn't have good contrast here. In fact, I had absolutely terrible contrast, but I was able to, burn down the leaves to create the contrast that I needed. That image wouldn't have been anything without that contrast. And then sometimes I combine, or often combine, several of the techniques for a single image. This is an underexposed, long exposure that had extreme burning and then dodging. Yeah. Another one where from the Faroes where all three techniques were employed. And another one. So multiple techniques to get that high contrast focus on the subject look. And sometimes you can even use these techniques to make a complicated image even simpler. This has got a lot of detail in it, but in a sense, it's a very simple image. Same with this one, so much detail. And lastly, another complex image that made simple through dodging and burning and underexposure. Oh, another one from Hawaii. Very detailed, but very simple at the same time. But remember, this is the important thought. Techniques can only help when you have a good idea and a vision for the image. Techniques without a vision is simply like putting lipstick on a pig. Techniques can't help it. And that's my little presentation, John.
Boy, that's a call. Absolutely brilliant. Nothing else needs to be said. I adore your work, and a lot of gasping from me in the background there because of the images. I especially love that tree, the tree line that you said is a complex image, but it really isn't. And that's what I just adore that image. So many of them I adore, but what a great way to help our viewers understand what's going on in your mind, the process that you're kind of going through. And most importantly, folks, understand what Cole's teaching here is all of these techniques, all these ideas are only helping him achieve the vision for what he has for his imagery. They're not gimmicks. They're not HDR for the next 6 months because that's what we're going to do. Cole's not going to use HDR unless there's a need for it and it allows him to do something that he's already thought about before he's gone out with a project or something. So thanks so much for sharing this. I bet that this episode is going to get the most views we've had of any episode. Because what I'm going to do when I write the title for it, I'm going to say 5 surefire techniques to make images that look like Cole Thompson's. Hey, thanks for doing that. Thanks for sharing. That was outstanding.
See ya.